Listen, I have this wife. Her name is Robyn, and she would never let me do anything naughty. As bad as I want to do it.
Greetings and welcome to the Sister Wives crew again. The location where we delve deeply into the stories, secrets, and controversies that aren't always visible through the cameras, going beyond the episodes. We are dealing with a huge issue today that, if verified, will fundamentally alter our understanding of the breakdown of the Brown family. I must be very clear from the beginning. Our discussion is predicated on a number of insider reports and unique theories compiled by legal professionals who have been watching this family, and an in-depth, speculative look at a story that has been simmering in the background for almost 10 years. This is not verified news. This is a hypothetical situation, a story built from the crumbs that were left behind. However, it's chilling how well the parts fit together. So take a drink, settle back, and get ready to explore the most shocking idea of the century. Meri Brown versus Kody and Robyn Brown. It's about the kids, Kody stated. This is just The first wife's unselfish act of commitment was demonstrated when she remarked, "It doesn't change anything in our family. Meri is still his wife. She was promised it was a sacrifice for the family, a noble act to secure the future of 3 children." However, our unique theory, which was assembled from insider rumors almost 10 years later, indicates that another story was developing behind the scenes. A tale of plot rather than sacrifice. A tale that would lead to a historic lawsuit asserting that the whole formal divorce was a deliberate fabrication. A plot to usurp her authority from the beginning. Alright crew, have you been blown away yet? Since we have only just begun. Do me a tremendous favor right now if you find this as explosive as I do and want to follow this amazing narrative through to the end. Press the like button. It notifies YouTube that more of this is needed. Additionally, click subscribe and ring that notification bell if you haven't already. You won't want to miss even a single moment of the proof we're going to present. Believe me, let's get started now. We must go back in time, not just to 2014, but to the Brown family's very beginnings, in order to comprehend the enormity of this purported litigation. It was not Meri Brown who was a wife. She took Kody into the realm of multiple marriages, was the first wife, the lawful wife, and hence, the one who welcomed Janelle and Christine into the family. She had a special role for 24 years. She was legally Kody's companion. Together with Kody, she was the matriarch in their family's structure and religion. This was not merely a symbolic status. It had both material and immaterial power. She had to make financial and legal judgments in the perspective of the law. She had access to the bank accounts, corporate files, and deeds. She was the original investor in the company, which was called the Brown family in every way. Then Robyn arrived. A new dynamic also emerged with Robyn. And finally a request. A request that would appear to be perfectly honorable on the surface. Dayton, Aurora, and Brianna were the 3 children from Robyn's previous marriage that Kody wished to adopt. It was a lovely notion, one that would connect them to him legally and ensure their future in the event that Robyn suffered any misfortune. There was only one issue. As per their state's regulations, you had to be legally married to your wife in order to adopt her children. And Meri and Kody were lawfully wed. This leads us to the notorious couch. That heartbreaking, tearful scene that has become a staple of Sister Wives mythology. Let's dissect this as the basis for a legal argument rather than as a reality TV scene. The genesis of the deception is what Meri's fictional legal team, let's suppose them the powerhouse firm of Vance and Sterling, would eventually term it. The 3 important players are on that couch. First, the request is coming from Kody, the patriarch. He presents it as a logistical requirement for the benefit of the kids. Pay attention to what he says. It's a sheet of paper. Our goal is to strengthen our family. The structure of the family will not be altered. He emphasizes the emotional appeal while downplaying the legal act. According to the legal theory we are studying, this is the first stage in the fraud, portraying a substantial financial and legal transaction as a formality with no practical ramifications for Meri, the plaintiff. Robyn second. She portrays the role of the appreciative emotional recipient who is worried about Meri's emotions as well. She breaks down in tears. Meri is very selfless and she says things like, "I didn't ask for this." She tells Meri and the audience that Meri's status will remain unaffected by this legal change. She says, "You'll always be the first wife," while crying. The second step is this. By putting on a united front of deceit and lulling the target into a false sense of security, the co-conspirator emotionally supports the primary statements. Third, the target, Meri. She is clearly upset. You can feel her suffering. She is relinquishing her legal identification of 24 years. She is joyful, which is why she is not sobbing. She is grieving a loss, which is why she is crying. However, she is being persuaded in real time on camera that this loss is only symbolic. On the basis of several assurances, she is making a sacrifice. This is the main focus of Meri's purported lawsuit. It has nothing to do with spiritual union. No court in the nation would make a decision on it. It concerns what is lawful. Promissory estoppel and fraudulent misrepresentation are terms used by professionals. Now let's state that simply. Making a false statement with the intent to deceive another person into signing a contract is known as fraudulent misrepresentation. In order to persuade Meri to sign the divorce papers, Kody and Robyn allegedly assured her that it wouldn't, even though they knew it would significantly alter the family's power and financial structure. Though slightly different, promissory estoppel is equally potent. It is a rule of law that asserts that a person may be held accountable if they make a specific, unambiguous promise to you and you break it to your own harm. The entire couch scene and innumerable such chats, according to Meri's theoretical legal team, comprised a verbal and spiritual contract, a clear and unambiguous commitment. Your status as the first wife will remain unchanged, and you will continue to have access to and a stake in the family's assets. This legal document will not be utilized to reduce your influence or position within the family. Meri relied on these assurances and took actions that were detrimental to her own well-being. The divorce papers were signed by her. She relinquished her legal status willingly. According to the lawsuit, this wasn't a gift. It was an exchange, a transaction. Furthermore, Kody and Robyn, the opposing party, had no intention of keeping their end of the agreement. What transpired after the new marriage certificate was filed and the divorce papers ink dried? Was the structure of the family unchanged? Did Meri continue to be regarded as the first spouse with a similar interest? You know the answer to that, crew. We all saw it occur. Her status was slowly being undermined. It started nearly instantly. Communication began to deteriorate. Now legally and solely bonded to Robyn, Kody started spending even more excessive amounts of time at her home. Previously purportedly discussed in a collective council, family choices were increasingly made between Kody and Robyn before being shared with the others. The voice of Meri, once a cornerstone of the family's leadership, it gradually faded into quiet, echo, and whisper. Everyone is aware of the scandal with catfishing. The official Brown family narrative, which Kody vigorously promoted for years, claimed that his and Meri's relationship had broken down because of the catfishing episode. He was no longer able to trust Meri or be in a full marriage with her because of her enormous sin and treachery. But what if that's a symptom, or more cynically, a handy excuse rather than the cause? According to the chronology suggested by these stories, the freeze-out started before the catfishing was even a rumor. The process was established by the formal divorce in late 2014. Already the emotional gap was widening. Simply put, the catfishing, which peaked in 2015, gave Kody and Robyn the public rationale they required to quicken an already starting process. Meri Brown's total and complete marginalization. Consider it. For years, Kody used the catfishing episode as a defense. Whenever he was asked about, he may appeal to his coldness toward Meri. She had cheated. She had a conversation with another man. The confidence has been betrayed. It successfully stifled criticism and portrayed Meri as the bad guy in her own misfortune. This cover story was ideal. Our findings indicate that a much more subdued and systematic drama, a financial one, was unfolding behind the scenes while the world was preoccupied with the catfish's emotional drama. At this point, Meri's case would shift from sentimental pledges to the stern money, because status and sentiments were never the only factors involved. Assets were at issue. Decades of resources. Consider the scenario in a courtroom. Standing before the judge is Meri's principal lawyer, Eleanor Vance, a shrewd, no-nonsense attorney in her 50s. For years, the world has been told a story of emotional collapse and treachery, but today we are here to tell a different story, one of calculated deception and financial fraud, and we will demonstrate that the defendants, Mr. and Mrs. The lawsuit would hinge on proving that a deliberate financial shift occurred immediately following Kody and Robyn's legal marriage. Brown did more than just break our client's heart. They carefully and methodically crafted a plan to destroy her bank account and erase her 24-year financial investment in this family. The tears shed on that couch in 2014 were not just about a change in marital status. They were the cover for a financial coup. On paper, Meri was a partner in their various family ventures, co-signed mortgages, had her name on joint accounts. And according to their own show, family finances were a collective pot, or what they called the family bank, where everyone's income went in and expenses were paid out. However, it was always murky, and Meri, as the legal wife, had a level of access and security that was legally protected. The family remained the same, the pot remained the pot, but this is where the first shocking piece of evidence would be presented in our hypothetical trial. Exhibit A: the financial shift. Picture a forensic accountant named David Chin, who is a numbers guy without emotion, taking the stand and presenting the facts as they appear on the documents before him. Your Honor, we examined the financial records of the Brown family from 2013 to 2010 before the legal. We noticed a recurring pattern after the September 2014 divorce. Significant family funds were kept in a joint business account under the names of Kody Brown and Meri Brown, which we'll refer to as the Family Prime account. Meri Brown had complete unfettered access to and signing authority over this account, which was used for large-scale transfers, family business expenses, and down payments on their Las Vegas homes. He would then pause to put on his glasses. On December 5, 2014, less than 3 weeks after Kody and Robyn were divorced, the accountant. As soon as they were legally married, the first big event occurred. The Family Prime account was closed and the entire balance, more than 6 figures, was moved to a newly opened account under the name K&R Family Enterprises, a new LLC that was filed that same week. The only signatories on this new account were Kody Brown and Robyn Brown. That was the first unavoidable step, and the collective family funds that Meri had previously legally co-controlled were now solely in Kody and Robyn's hands. However, it wouldn't stop there. The accountant would then give a timeline. Over the course of the following 18 months, there was allegedly a systematic rerouting of funds, with proceeds from TLC income from my sister wife's closet and other sources of income that had previously flowed into the collective pot being diverted to accounts under the sole control of Kody and Robyn. Meri was purposefully kept out of this new financial ecosystem, from which she was still expected to contribute, and she was still paying her mortgage, of course. Meri's lawyers would argue that this was the direct, tangible result of the fraudulent misrepresentation. They promised her nothing would change, but the first thing they did was change the family's entire financial infrastructure to a huge Las Vegas house, helping with family expenses, but she lost her access and oversight, was no longer a partner, and was reduced to a mere employee or tenant, paying her way without any say in the direction of the company. Reminiscent of that couch scenario, they would combine wealth and power under their formal union. Meri's attorney asked, "Does this appear like simply a piece of paper? Does it appear that forming a new LLC that excludes your 24-year partner and closing joint bank accounts doesn't alter the family structure?" she would ask the court. No, this was a calculated financial ploy, and they used the emotional appeal of adoption as a cover to complete it. Naturally, Kody and Robyn's. Kody's attorney responded, "Your Honor, my client's actions were not malicious." The defense would have a counterargument, and their attorneys would probably argue that it was an issue of legal practicality. They made sense. The decision to consolidate their resources was a wise move given their new legal situation, as Mr. Brown was now legally responsible for Robyn and her 3 children in addition to his and Meri's 1 kid. There was no intention to cause harm to Ms. They would use the catfishing to paint Meri as unstable and untrustworthy, claiming that her own actions required walling her off financially to protect the family. But Meri's team would be prepared for that, claiming that the timeline doesn't support it, and that the financial consolidation started before the catfishing scandal became public knowledge. Brown. The financial separation was caused by the breakdown of their personal relationship, which she herself has admitted fault in. This financial evidence is the cornerstone of the case, but it's the next piece of the puzzle that makes the alleged fraud so breathtakingly personal and cruel. It's the piece that connects it all to the land they once called their family's promised land. We're talking about Coyote Pass. The move to Flagstaff in 2018 was a financial disaster from the beginning. Meri's subsequent actions simply gave them the perfect excuse to enact it more aggressively. They ostensibly worked as a single family, building their forever homes together with 4 wives and 1 husband, when they sold their Las Vegas home, which she had put her own money and effort into, and the equity went into the family pot, which was now allegedly fully controlled by Kody and Robyn. She paid her share, earned her plot of land, and we all saw the maps. Meri got the plot in the trees, the one she loved, but a piece of. Refinancing is a common financial tool, but the way they allegedly did it forms the second pillar of Meri's case. According to these insider reports, when the family was struggling financially in Flagstaff, juggling mortgages and land payments, Kody and Robyn decided to refinance their massive $1 million home, the one they were living in while Meri was in a rental. This is where we get to Exhibit B, the head of household clause and the refinancing scheme. Lawsuit. They used the Coyote Pass property itself, the family's main asset, as collateral, using the total value of the land that Meri, Janelle and Christine had all contributed to. However, when the new loan documents were created and the new deeds were filed, an oddity occurred. Kody was listed as the primary owner. Robyn Sullivan was listed as the sole co-owner on the primary parcel, the one against which the majority of the loan was leveraged. In the eyes of the bank and the law, Meri's stake in the family property had disappeared, absorbed into the equity now legally controlled by Kody and his one legal stakeholder. Her name was nowhere to be found. Janelle's was on a separate, smaller parcel deed, and Christine's was similarly segregated, but the core financial documents, the ones that connected their new home to the family land, effectively erased Meri's 24-year investment. In a legal and financial masterstroke, they used family funds, including Meri's, to purchase land, then used their exclusive legal marriage to borrow against that. Meri's lawyers would argue that this was the ultimate bait and switch, persuading her to relinquish her legal status on the grounds that her stake would be protected. They then used that very legal status, their exclusive marriage, to rewrite the ownership of the assets she had assisted in purchasing, completely cutting her out. It wasn't merely an oversight. The lawsuit would assert that this was a purposeful act, a head of household clause in the loan application, a box checked, a signature on a line, all minor actions that culminated in the legal codification of her demotion. She had been left helpless, dependent on the empire she helped build. And most damning of all, she had no idea. She was left with all of the risk and none of the legal ownership. The discovery of this financial eraser was, according to these reports, the last straw, the moment Meri realized that this wasn't just an emotional abandonment, but a cold, calculated financial one that had been going on for years. She was never asked to sign anything, and our sources say she only learned about these disparities much later, when she started attempting to sort out her own finances in anticipation of her eventual departure. The document she signed in 2014 wasn't just a divorce decree. The scene was set for a court battle that would destroy the Brown family's meticulously crafted image. Welcome back to the Sister Wives crew. She signed her own financial eviction notice, but she didn't realize it at the time. She allegedly decided to fight back for justice and the return of what was systematically stolen from her under the pretense of family unity, not for her spiritual status or to win back Kody's love. In Part 1, we outline the foundation, the heartfelt promises made during the 2014 legal divorce, and the immediate systematic financial shift that allegedly followed, consolidating all power and money into the hands of Kody and his new legal wife, Robyn. Now in Part 2, we go inside the courtroom and go over the explosive evidence, the confirmed bombshell report that Meri Brown filed a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against Kody and Robyn Brown for fraud and promissory estoppel. Theoretically, the case of Brown versus Brown and Brown would not be a media circus by design. Meri's legal team, Vance and Sterling, would have advised against the spectacle. The case was about legal and financial restitution, not reality TV drama, but the defendant's nature meant the world would be rocked by dramatic testimony, the final verdict that, according to this theory, sent shockwaves through the plural marriage community, and the most public way possible to vindicate Meri Brown. In her opening statement, Eleanor Vance, Meri's lead counsel, would describe how she had devoted her life and money to a dream only to be defrauded by the two people she should have been able to trust the most. The trial would begin with Eleanor Vance framing the story not as a rejected wife but as a defrauded business partner, saying, "This case is not about love or religion. This has to do with a contract. An agreement reached during a sofa broadcast to millions but still a contract. There was a pledge. The defendants, as we will show, started breaking their end of the agreement before the ink was even dry on their new marriage certificate. Kody and Robyn's defense team, let's call them Sharp & Associates, would aggressively counter by attempting to discredit Meri personally. Give up your legal standing, and in return your position and your financial stake in this family will remain secure. Ms. Brown upheld her end of the bargain. They would paint her as emotionally unstable, dishonest, bringing up the catfish, and driven by retaliation and jealousy. According to Kody's attorney, the plaintiff's case is based on sand. It is an attempt to turn her regret and personal shortcomings into a paycheck. There was no financial coup. Instead, it was a family adjusting to a new legal reality, one that was required by the plaintiff's own emotional distance and, to be honest, her own deceptions. It is not a case of fraud but rather sour grapes. The forensic accountant David Chin would be the first witness. We briefly discussed his findings in part 1, but during the trial he would spend days on the stand guiding the jury through a maze of financial documents, which is where the scope of the alleged deception would become horrifyingly clear. The battle lines would be drawn, the evidence would be presented, and the Brown family's public image would be methodically and brutally destroyed. Chin would provide a mountain of evidence, including credit card statements, to demonstrate how, prior to 2014, major family expenses were distributed among cards owned by Meri, Janelle, Christine, and Kody. After 2015, he would reveal a new trend: a high-limit business card assigned exclusively to Kody and Robyn, which was used to pay for the majority of family travel, luxury purchases, and even grocery bills. Meri, Janelle, and Christine were increasingly using their own separate cards. Chin would show documents demonstrating the payment structure from the production company, proving that payments were made to the Brown family's joint production company, in which Meri was a founding partner, prior to the legal marriage. He would then show a new contract renegotiated in 2016 where payments were restructured to be paid because the family pot was turning into Kody and Robyn's private expense account, the TLC income trail. The accountant would present the original business filings, identifying Meri as a key partner, and then demonstrate how after 2015, the business was allowed to fail, but its assets remained intact. Meri, Janelle, and Christine were paid a talent fee or stipend out of that LLC, an amount decided solely by Kody and Robyn, transitioning from being partners to effectively salaried employees of Kody and Robyn Incorporated, My Sister Wife's Closet, the notorious jewelry business. Kody's lawyer would try to poke holes in this during cross-examination. Mr. Chin, isn't it true that my clients were simply better at business? Isn't it true that my clients were the ones putting in the work while the plaintiff was distracted with her online relationships? Inventory and inventory were absorbed into a new online venture controlled by Robyn with no profit-sharing agreement with the original partners. I can't speak to anyone's work ethic, Chin stated. I can only talk about the money flow. And the data clearly and unmistakably demonstrates that starting in the fourth quarter of 2014, all significant sources of revenue and assets were consolidated into businesses under the defendant's sole control. There would be silence in the courtroom. The jurors would be frantically taking notes. That sheet of paper was beginning to resemble a well-executed business plan. Then there would be the Coyote Pass proof, Meri's Exhibit B. A real estate law specialist would be called by the legal team to testify and go into agonizing detail about the refinance documents. The original land purchase agreement, which included Kody and all 4 wives mentioned in the family trust that purchased the land, would be shown to the jury by the expert. He would then display the 2019 refinance documentation for everyone to view on the overhead projector. As you can see here in the section detailing the collateral for this new loan of over $500 Boston dollars, real estate specialists remarked. The entire Coyote Pass property is listed as the primary asset, but Kody Brown and Robyn Brown are the borrowers and signatories on the deed of trust, which effectively placed a lien on the entire property, including the parcels designated for the other wives, but made them the only legal beneficiaries of the loan and the primary title holders. To put it simply, they borrowed money against an asset they only partially owned, and in doing so, they legally elevated their ownership claim above the other partners who had also put money into it. This would be the subject of a harsh cross-examination when Kody took the stand. Meri's attorney Eleanor Vance stated, "Mr. You have stated in your testimony, Brown, that you always planned to give each of your wives a separate piece of land on Coyote Pass." "Yes, of course," Kody replied. The plan was always that. On the mountain, we were going to be one large, contented family, Vanso remarked. However, when you refinanced your house with Robyn, your legal wife, did you not utilize the full property as collateral? I am the head of this family. I make the financial decisions. It's my responsibility, Kody said. We had to. We needed the money for the family. It was a financial decision. Vance said, a financial decision that you made without consulting Meri Brown, without getting her signature, even though her money, her investment was tied up in that land. Of 24 years from the deeds to use her assets as leverage for your personal benefit without providing her with any legal protection? Is that what a con artist does? Or is that what the leader of the household does, Mr. Brown? In order to support the allegations of a purposeful freeze-out, Meri's team would use their legal standing, the very status Meri had given them, to monetarily neuter her, the human aspect, and witness testimony. The courtroom would explode, the judge would hammer the gavel, but the point would have been made. Need to demonstrate a pattern of behavior, not just numbers. This is where our speculative trial would become very personal, and the first witness to give this background would be Kody Brown, who would be there to establish the situation rather than criticize Kody. She would testify about the family's financial practices in Lehigh and Las Vegas, confirming that prior to Robyn, important decisions were made by consensus. Kody's voice was steady, but with a touch of melancholy. Meri, the legal wife, frequently had the last say on the paperwork, but the group, Vance, made the final decision. After 2014, Ms. Brown, after the legal marriage to Robyn, Kody's size, the meetings stopped. We would sit in the living room and discuss everything. Whether it was the purchase of the Lehigh house or the move to Vegas, we all had a say and vote. It wasn't always perfect, but we were a team. Discover after the fact. The decision to purchase Robyn's enormous Flagstaff home wasn't made by a group. We were only informed that it was taking place. The family pot felt like it was theirs, and we were fortunate to have a piece of it. Kody's testimony would be devastating because it would confirm the timeline of Meri's exclusion and demonstrate that it wasn't a singular incident but rather a fundamental change in the way the entire family operated. However, her lawyer would take her through her 30-year journey with Kody, describing her early financial contributions, working multiple jobs in the early years to support the family while the other wives raised the young children, establishing her deep foundational investment, and then asking her about the divorce. Meri Brown herself would provide powerful testimony, not as the sobbing, broken woman from that 2014 couch, but as a calm, dignified survivor. Ms. Brown, what specific promises did Kody and Robyn make to you when they proposed to divorce in order for him to adopt her children? Meri's voice broke with emotion for the first time. They swore to me that nothing would change, Kody said, looking me in the eyes. You will always be my first wife, he said. Just for the children. It's a piece of paper. Robyn sobbed while holding my hand and vowed that our family will never allow this to separate us. And if they hadn't made those promises, if they had told you the truth that they intended to close your joint accounts, rewrite the business contracts, and remove your name from the family property deeds, would you have signed those divorce papers? Meri looked straight at the jury, her eyes now streaming freely. Never in a million years. I would have never agreed to it. They asked for a sacrifice and I gave it to them voluntarily. I didn't know I was. Closing arguments and the wait. The closing arguments would summarize the two opposing narratives. Kody and Robyn's lawyer would argue it was a financial dispute, but Meri's testimony would tie the cold, hard numbers from the financial experts to the raw human betrayal of broken promises, turning the case from a dry financial dispute into a profound moral tragedy. I didn't know I was funding my own exile, signing away my entire life's work. He would portray Meri as a spiteful ex-wife seeking a last paycheck. Kody's lawyer. Love faded. Trust was broken. It's a sad story we see every day. The plaintiff wants you to think this was a grand conspiracy, a plot worthy of a movie. The reality is much more ordinary. It was a messy, painful separation. And now she wants someone to blame. But the defense wants you to think that this is the case. Eleanor Vance would then stand for Meri's final rebuttal. She would go over to a large screen and display two images side by side. A copy of the Coyote Pass refinancing deed with only Kody and Robyn's names on it on one side, and the 2014 photo of the three of them on the couch on the other. But there is no financial compensation for that. About a broken heart. Take a look at these two pictures. This is not about a broken heart. Rather, it is about a broken promise. A calculated, legally executed broken promise. The defendants did not simply stop loving Meri Brown. They systematically deprived her of her life savings, her assets, and her power, using her love for their children as the key. They told her it was a piece of paper, but they used it as a weapon and a shield, a weapon to take control of the. This isn't a divorce case, Your Honor. This is a heist, and we are asking you to make them give back what they stole. The jury would then be dismissed to deliberate. The hours would pass. The media would be in a frenzy. For Kody and Robyn, their entire empire and reputation would be on the line. For Meri, it was about a last desperate plea for validation, a chance to have her truth be heard and believed. Meri would sit with her lawyers, her posture straight, her face a mask of calm, but her hands tightly clasped in her lap. The jury foreman, a middle-aged woman who had listened carefully to every word of testimony, would stand, clear her throat, and unfold a jury sheet. The courtroom would be packed on the day the verdict was announced, and the air would be thick with tension. Kody and Robyn would sit at their table, Robyn clutching Kody's arm, both looking pale and strained. Foreman stated, on the charge of fraudulent misrepresentation, the jury found for the plaintiff Meri Brown. On the charge of promissory estoppel, the jury found for the plaintiff Meri Brown. It was a clean sweep. The judge would proceed to the penalty phase after the jury believed Meri, believed the promises were made, and believed they were broken with malicious intent. The jury recommended damages, but the court would decide the exact amount. Meri's team had submitted. The amount they requested was in the millions, along with detailed financial documents that calculated her lost equity from the Las Vegas homes, her share of the Coyote Pass property, and her lost income from the family's joint ventures. The judge would return after a brief break to deliver his final ruling on the damages and a statement that would be quoted in headlines worldwide. The judge's voice was deep, authoritative, and full of moral outrage. The court has reviewed the evidence and the jury's findings. He would pause, looking directly at Kody and Robyn Brown. The judge's decision, the final word, stated that although this court cannot and will not rule on matters of spiritual status or religious principle, it can and must. It is evident to this court that the defendants, Kody and Robyn Brown, engaged in a pattern of deception. They made explicit, unambiguous promises to the plaintiff to persuade her to pursue legal action, which resulted in the dissolution of her 24-year marriage, which was severely detrimental to her financial and legal standing. The court finds that Kody Brown and Robyn Brown are jointly and severally liable for damages because of the obvious financial promises made and then broken. The evidence demonstrates a cynical bait and switch that used the emotionally charged plea of child adoption to enable what can only be described as a legal and financial coup, and the plaintiff was not treated as a spiritual partner to be protected but rather as a financial barrier to be removed. Let this ruling be a clear statement. This court will not allow the law to be used as a tool to legally codify the emotional and financial abandonment of one's first wife. The defendants are ordered to pay the $400,000. This amount represents the court's conservative estimate of the equity she was denied in the family's Flagstaff assets, which she was duped into purchasing only to have them systematically erased from the title. The point was the verdict, not the millions she might have been owed. The judge's words, bait and switch, financial coup, abandonment, and guilt of fraudulent misrepresentation were all part of the complete vindication. According to these reports, the fallout was disastrous for Kody and Robyn, shattering their carefully constructed image of a morally upright, if dysfunctional, family. The decision gave legal weight to what fans had suspected for years, that Robyn's entry into the family was. The irony would be thick enough to choke on. The verdict would be a seismic event for the other wives, and for Christine, who had already left, it would be a powerful blow. Not an addition but a takeover, and Meri's divorce was the key that turned the lock. How would they pay? They would probably have to sell Robyn's enormous house, the one she claimed she needed for her young children, and they might even have to sell off parcels of Coyote Pass, the very land they had used as leverage to exclude Meri. The verdict wouldn't just be a victory for Meri. It would be the last nail in the coffin of the entire polygamous Brown family experiment. For Janelle, it would likely be the last push she needed to secure her own financial independence and cut the last remaining ties. And for Meri, she would leave that courthouse with a quiet, powerful dignity, not with a tearful, dramatic speech, but because she had faced her accusers, told her truth, and been. In this breathtakingly speculative story, the court of law finally agreed, ruling that the promises made to her were worth far, far more. They were a contract, and the price for breaking it was justice. So what do you think, crew? Is this explosive theory plausible? Do the pieces of evidence we've seen on the show for years fit? She had lost her marriage and her family, but in that courtroom she had won back something far more valuable, her story. This in-depth examination is, of course, a work of speculative analysis based on reports, but it's a narrative that, for many, answers questions that have been bothering them for 10 years. It reframes Meri not as a sullen, betrayed lover, but as a victim of a sophisticated, long-term fraud. What evidence from the show supports this theory? What parts do you disagree with? Let me know what you think in the comments below. I appreciate you joining me on this amazing deep dive, and if you found it as fascinating as I did, please remember to hit the like button, subscribe to Sister Wives Crew, and ring the bell so you never miss our exclusive reports and theories. Until we meet again, stay perceptive and stay curious. This is a huge conversation and it's just getting started.